Okay, this is the first video in the series, the De-Escalation Plan, Responding Effectively to Child or Youth Emotional and Behavioral Outbursts. This is Dr. Barnabas, PhD, Nationally Certified School Psychologist, Licensed Behavior Specialist in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania speaking. Today we're going to look at this de-escalation plan. We're going to go through one skill, one step at a time. If you work together with me or you're watching this video, you're probably one of my clients in a school or a home where we're going through our de-escalation plan that consists of the 5 S's, including stop, which means stop what you're doing, be prepared to think about it. Separate, separating from the stressor, go into a different area, a calm down area, something like that. Soothe, engaging in the coping skills that your child or youth is practicing together with me so that they can calm down and think more clearly. Solve, which is problem solving. Once that child or youth is able to calm down and think more clearly, going through a problem solving process. And 5, set up for success, which is really focusing on relationship development, conflict resolution, all those other skills that can build upon problem solving once a child or youth learns to calm themselves, soothe themselves, think more clearly, and then start to take action, rather than taking action before they're even able to calm down. So next, every video in this series is going to follow a very specific format. First, we're going to look at common mistakes, each one of those steps that we talked about in the 5 S's. Obviously, those common mistakes involve what not to do in certain situations. We're also going to look at effective strategies, which involve things to do, techniques to try, things that we'll train together on. If you're a client, a parent, or teacher that works together with me, we'll probably have a system where I model it, and then we kind of do it together with your student or child, and then I'll coach you to do it independently on your own. And then other points which might be helpful details, tips, and resources. So let's look at this first step in the de-escalation plan of the 5 S's. Stop. What does that mean? If I'm working together with your child or your student, your youth, what that means is working together on impulse control, being able to stop themselves when they first recognize or become emotionally aware that they're beginning to get angry, or beginning to get stressed, or beginning to get frustrated. Helping that child recognize those signs in their body, in their thoughts, and in terms of what they're saying to themselves, so that before things get out of hand, they know it's time to stop. But we also have to realize this involves a parent role as well, which is what we commonly refer to as a transfer of skills. That means skills to support and facilitate the child in impulse control, such as helping them label those emotional states in terms of emotional awareness, preventing escalation at the earliest point possible. If I work together with you, I might be in your home or classroom 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours a week, and you're there the rest of the time with this child or this student that has some oppositional and defiant behavioral problems. What that means is this transfer of skills is to help you with this first step in preventing that escalation from getting worse than it may already be. We also usually work together with this sort of chain of events series, or we have this chain of events tracking sheet where we look at the situation, the build-up, and the trigger, which is under the control of the adult and the environment, and the thoughts, the feelings, and the behavior the youth chooses to do, which I work together on with them. When we're looking at that stop piece in terms of transfer of skills to parent, we're focused on the build-up, those things that lead up to the problematic situation. So, this video is going to focus on common mistakes in terms of what not to do, focus specifically on one thing: arguing. Okay? It's important that we come to an operational definition of arguing and what that means when we talk about it. Some people call it a coercive exchange, but I think it's a more colloquial to use the word arguing. So what I'm talking about is a back and forth verbal exchange between the child or the oppositional youth and an adult. It has increasing intensity where each person kind of gets more and more intense. Maybe there's yelling, maybe there's aggression, maybe there's throwing things, either on the part of the adult or the child. It usually begins with an end of a preferred activity, like stop playing those video games, or okay, free time is over, or the beginning of a non-preferred activity, like hey, remember to take out the trash, or alright, it's time to start math work. And it usually ends, or almost always ends, when either the adult or the youth gives in. The adult might get frustrated and say, I can't do this anymore, fine, do what you want, or the youth might say, fine, I'll do it. but usually it's not in a healthy or positive end, and it's not ending in a way that helps facilitate a healthy relationship. These are a couple examples. The parent might say, "Johnny, please clean up your room." And Johnny says, "What room? I share one with my brother. It's his room too. The room that you left a mess in today. I already cleaned my area. He can clean the rest himself." "Great. So if I check it right now, your room's going to be clean? I don't have to clean his side of the room." "Listen, you have a choice. Clean it now or you're grounded." "You can't ground me." "I guess you made the choice to be grounded. Try and make me stay here. You can't keep me from going out." "That's disrespect. Now go to your room. You're grounded." "F you." Maybe the parent moves closer to their son, Johnny. Johnny pulls away, glares, starts to yell and scream or throw things, raises their fist like they're going to hit the parent. What does it look like with some of my teacher consultees? "Johnny, please turn in your assignment." "What assignment?" "The assignment you didn't finish during class." "I did finish it." "Great, then please turn it in." "I don't have it with me now." "Listen, you have a choice. Turn it in or do it again." "You never believe me." "I guess you made the choice to do it again." "Make me." "That's disrespect. Get out of this classroom. Go to the office right now." "F you." The teacher has to stop instruction, move closer, maybe try to guide the student out. The student pulls away, glares, and gets ready to punch the teacher. These are two great examples of that argumentative exchange of increasing intensity that almost always results in one person giving in and the other person either escaping the non-preferred activity or having access to a preferred activity, which just strengthens that cycle. So, what are these common mistakes that involve this very first step in de-escalation, and what does arguing have to do with it? Remember that when you're arguing with an oppositional youth or child, they are really engaging in their primary symptoms, and if we argue with them, we are reinforcing, strengthening, and feeding into each one of these symptoms, which have been identified by the American Psychiatric Association from their Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. So we know that this oppositional youth often argues with adults. If we get an argumentative exchange with them, we're just teaching them that arguing is the best tool to use. We're strengthening and reinforcing that argumentative behavior. Then we know that these children often lose their temper. And what causes that loss of temper? That argumentative exchange of increasing intensity. Again, if we get into that exchange, all we're doing is reinforcing them to lose their temper faster and with more intensity. We know that these children often actively defy or refuse to comply with adult requests or rules. Remember, that exchange almost always begins with the end of a preferred activity or beginning of a non-preferred activity, which usually results in that defiance or non-compliance, and then that increasing exchange of intensity. So if we engage in that, we're just feeding into that cycle and strengthening it and reinforcing it. We also know these youth often deliberately annoy people. Why do they do that? Why are they going around antagonizing and agitating other people in their environment? So they can start the argument. Remember, the argument is their bread and butter for accessing preferred activities or ending non-preferred activities. There are other sort of functions, but those are usually the two primary ones, depending on the individual child. But by annoying people, they're just digging into their first tool in their toolbox, which is arguing, and pulling other people into that exchange. We have to try to avoid that at all costs unless we want to see that behavior increase or strengthen. They often blame others. They say it's this person's responsibility or that person's responsibility, that person's fault for getting in an argument with me. Because of their perception of those types of social situations, getting into an argument isn't going to change their opinion or change anything except increase and strengthen that idea. The other person started the argument with me, so on and so forth. Again, we want to avoid it unless we want to strengthen that symptom. They're often touchy or easily annoyed. They've been in this argumentative exchange over and over again, and as soon as you touch a nerve or try to lay a demand on them or pull away a preferred activity, they're going to go right to that argumentative tool in their toolbox, which means they look touchy or easily annoyed. You give one small thing like, "Please put your fork away," or "Please sharpen your pencil," and before you know it, they're screaming and yelling, escalated voice, because they're used to this cycle of argumentative increasing intensity, and they want to pull you into it. They're often angry or resentful because when you act this way, your relationships with other people begin to hurt. And over time, both parties, the adult and the youth, become angry with one another, resentful of one another, and their relationship is really hurting. Along the same lines, they become spiteful or vindictive because from their perspective, everybody's kind of out to get them. They're just using their number one tool that they've learned how to use and that other people have strengthened for them, and then they're being punished for it. So remember that the escalation in behavior, if it turns into yelling or screaming or throwing things or other forms of aggression, almost always begins with an argument. And that argument always requires at least two people. And the thing about that is it gives us hope, because even though there are certain things that only the youth or child can control, there are several things that we as the adult, as the parent or the teacher, can control in the environment in terms of avoiding this common mistake. So we know we have to avoid the argument. We know it always takes two to tango, right? We don't want to get in this dance with them. We don't want to get in the argumentative exchange. They might try to keep starting it and starting it and starting it, but it's up to us to avoid it and to end it. That means that we cannot engage in a back and forth verbal exchange. If we recognize we're in that argument or where it's escalating, then what we need to do is try a different strategy, which we'll talk about in the next video. We have to ignore any attempt to continue the argument. Often we will walk away or we will try something else, and they will try to pull us back into the argument. It's a technique I often view or label as baiting. They might know, I don't know, you have a favorite thing in the house. They'll try to mess with it. They might know you have certain emotional buttons, and they'll try to push them because they want to pull you back into that argument. Remember, in any verbal argument with the oppositional youth or child, both parties are losing. Even though it might feel like you win sometimes, the adult wins sometimes, and the child wins sometimes, both people are losing because we're strengthening, reinforcing, and feeding into those symptoms we talked about earlier. It's better just to avoid the argument and use a technique or strategy that's more effective, like the ones we're talking about in the next video. Again, the only way to win the game is not to play at all. If you engage in the argumentative exchange, both the adult and the child are losing. Your relationship is hurting, and you're strengthening those negative symptoms that we want to see go down and decrease. So, I like to end every one of these videos with some important questions. If I'm currently working together with you, that means that we're going to answer these questions together. At this point in the video, just call me over. I'm probably in your house or in your classroom, or somewhere in your school, and the very next time we meet, we need to answer these questions before we can go on to the next skill. The number for one question: what is the number one most common mistake that parents, teachers, and other adults make when dealing with an oppositional youth or child? Question number two: in your own words, give 2 to 3 reasons why in any verbal argument with an oppositional youth, both parties are losing. What does that mean? That any time we engage in an argument with this oppositional youth, both the adult and the child are losing. It might feel like someone wins sometimes, but the reality is nobody wins. And number 3, in your experience as a parent or teacher, what strategies have been most effective with helping your oppositional youth or child avoid angry or aggressive emotional outbursts? I can almost guarantee that arguing hasn't led to a decrease in emotional outbursts. But what strategies have you tried? You know your student or your child better than I do. You've known them for much longer than I have. So before we try the skills coming up in the next videos, it's very important you spend this next week or 2 weeks thinking about what are the strategies that I know have been most effective with avoiding or decreasing that argumentative and emotional outbursts. Again, our next lesson, our next video is going to focus on effective strategies, techniques that we can use instead of arguing in order to minimize emotional and behavioral outbursts with an oppositional youth or child. Always remember what I call the 2 big butts. Number 1, your child's behavior is not your fault. It's important we don't just play the blame game. Your child's behavior is not your fault, but helping to correct your child's behavior is your responsibility. Number 2, if you want the same thing, then just keep doing the same thing. If you want an argument, an emotional behavioral outburst, then just keep arguing. But if you want something different for you and for your child and for your relationship with them, for your family, for your home, for your quality of life, then you need to do something different. Yes, the child's responsible for their behavior, but we're responsible for helping them correct it. So if you want something different, then you need to do something different. That choice is yours. Again, this has been Dr. Barnabas, Nationally Certified School Psychologist. pediatric and family health clinician, and licensed behavior specialist in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'll see you in the next video.